Another Kevin who almost blew up the high school. By JBH007. The other recent post about a Kevin in chemistry class almost blowing up a high school reminded me of a similar story that happened to me 11 years ago. The story spread on campus due to the hilarity of Kevin's actions, but was originally a serious issue before the whole story came out. A student in one of the freshman science classes decided that he'd be super cool and show off his brand new lighter, for 14-15 years olds, that was seen as cool, and decided the science class was the best place to just randomly light it and burn things. Well, apparently next to where he was sitting was a gas leak that he proceeded to keep trying to light because the flames seemed really cool and he wanted to see what would happen. When the teacher caught him, and demanded an explanation, he denied doing anything. Apparently there were no random flames and loud noises whooshing in the back of the class, and Kevin definitely didn't have a still-lit lighter in his hands. When the teacher turned on for a second, probably to tell everyone to get out once he realized that the gas wasn't from a nozzle but rather the wall, Kevin tried to light it again, and thankfully nothing happened as the teacher saw it and grabbed the lighter and pulled it away. Kevin apparently denied he did anything wrong and that the lighter wasn't his. Everyone who saw him, including the teacher, was lying or mistaken. When that didn't work, he tried to claim he was a hero for catching the gas leak before it exploded, in spite of the fact that he probably would have caused the explosion. When everyone first heard about the potential for the freshman science classes to blow up, everyone freaked out. Probably best not to have the evacuation zone within 1,000 feet of the building, but by the next day no one could stop laughing about the stupidity of Kevin. There were jokes about how he saved everyone by being so stupid, but his eventual punishment was seen as well-deserved. TL, Dr. Kevin nearly blew up high school by trying to light a gas leak. Later demands to be called a hero.
A Popular Kevina by deleted. Now, a lot of people at 16 can say some dumb things, but there were a couple of people in my life at that age that I just knew were beyond stupid and would continue to be that way for life. One of them, Pretty Kevina, was very popular due to her looks and fitness, but throughout our school years had said some of the dimmest things imaginable. She was honestly a fairly sweet girl, but for the purposes of entertainment I'll list off what I can remember. Islam the Lion. In religious education, we were learning about Islam and Kevina decided to pipe up and say that's not a real religion. The teacher said, "What do you mean? Of course it's real." Kevina, "No it's not, it's a lion. You know from that film? Aslan isn't a religion." The whole class groaned and we tried to tell her that Islam and Aslan were two different things and that Islam was very much a real thing, to which she replied, "Aslan is real? OMG, Narnia is real, guys." A balanced diet. In science class there was some obligatory health lesson where we went over diet and that food plate that contains all the foods you can eat to have a balanced diet and how much of it you're allowed. As per usual in food charts, carbs took up most of the plate, although half the carbs were things like pasta and potatoes and the other half was fruits and veggies. Then came protein, then fats, and then a tiny sliver of it contained treats like crisps or chocolate bars. Now, at 16 I always assumed that other kids knew that although as part of a balanced diet you can incorporate cheat foods in small doses, obviously they don't bring any nutritional benefit and are only ever featured on food plates to show people how much snack food they should be consuming at the maximum. Our science teacher went through the usual crap about how to eat a balanced diet and for some reason we got onto cavemen and what their diets were like. He mentioned meat, fruit, nuts, vegetables and more carb-heavy foods like potatoes, but obviously no modern foods like chocolate bars or crisps. Kevina pipes up once again. "So they didn't eat any chocolate bars? Well then why didn't they all die? You need sweets and crisps to live." "No you don't, Kevina, those foods didn't even exist then. But they're part of the food plate. If you don't eat chocolate you'll die." We tried to tell her that a balanced diet was designed for modern people and that it only included cheat foods as a guide, but Kevina was sure a Twix bar and some Monster Munch was needed to survive.
Kevina the Housemate by @Era. This is going back a few years now, but when I was at university, I had the dubious honor of sharing a house with not one, but two Kevinas. This is the story of the first one I encountered. She was a spoiled rich brat, so I'm unsure where the cluelessness ends and the descent into Kevinness begins. But still, Here's a brief account of the shit she forced us through. Refused to wash up dishes. Ever. Apparently she was allergic to soapy water. Ordered takeaways to be delivered, from the shop 3 doors down from the house. She even paid the delivery charge. Blew through her student loan within the first few weeks of semester. Whenever we needed money for rent, bills, shopping, etc., she would call Daddy to transfer money. During Christmas break, she was the last one to go home, massive mistake. Kevina left a tap running in the kitchen, which ended up flooding the basement. She also turned off the heating, so we came back in January to a flooded, frozen house. Left the house unoccupied and the front door wide open. Many, many times. Could never remember the 4-digit code for the house alarm. Woke up the entire house several times by coming home in the small hours and setting off the alarm. I took to writing the code on the inside of the flip-down panel cover. I know, great security but needs must. She still set the alarm off every time. Left her laptop plugged in and switched on constantly. When asked to turn it off to save electricity, she said that it would forget her work. After some back and forth, it turned out that every essay she had written for the last 3 years was still open on her laptop. She didn't know how to save them, and when shown previously, hadn't been able to find the documents again afterwards. Bought a new wardrobe. We never found out what happened to the old one. So far, not so Kevina. This new wardrobe was second-hand from a charity shop, pre-built, and very, very large. Honestly, I'm surprised there wasn't a lion hiding at the back of it. We came home to find that Kevina had somehow laid the wardrobe on its side and tried to slide it up the stairs. It had then wedged into the corner and refused to move any further. Kevina had chosen to deal with this problem by going out to shout at the shop staff who'd sold it to her. And left the door open. Kevina was very overweight. Something to do with an all-takeaway diet. She claimed to still be a size 8 and bought clothes accordingly. One day, she sat down too quickly and did a Bruce Banner. Kevina blamed the cheap, shitty clothes. No Kevina. Just no.
Kevin does not understand LEDs. By TheFilthyDIL. Back again. I'm the one who is married to the Kevin who thought that vaginas were inside-out penises, men have one less rib than women, etc. I can't believe I forgot this one. As background, our house does not have central air conditioning. When it gets hot we go downstairs to the basement family room for the most part, and when it gets really hot we then put in a window AC. As you probably know, old-fashioned incandescent bulbs get very hot. It gets so hot that they can noticeably raise the temperature in a small room. They are also getting very, very hard to find. I wanted to put LED bulbs in those overhead fixtures to reduce the heat output. Because this is a basement and gets kind of dark, I wanted the ones that give the equivalent of 100-watt incandescents. Kevin blew up. Those are 100-watt bulbs. Those sockets are only rated for 60 watts. You can't put those anywhere in the house. The actual wattage, as printed on the box, 11 watts. 11. I pointed out that the sockets were only rated for 60 watts because of the heat of incandescents. That this was not a 100-watt bulb, that it just gave the light of a 100-watt bulb. That it didn't even get as hot as an old-fashioned Christmas tree bulb, the big ugly kind he kept wanting to put on our trees until I threw them away. I bought the bulbs anyway. I put them in assorted sockets, as the lights in them burned out. They did not melt the sockets. They remained cool to the touch. They reduced the electric bill. And I noticed yesterday that Kevin had replaced a burned-out bulb in the downstairs family room with an LED.
Coworker Kevin comes within inches of shooting me by shamaze. Short background: I worked private security in the Middle East. We are generally former special forces or combat medics, or both. He was a medic in a basic unit, one that is considered one of the lowest in combat. We had a client and there was a dust storm outside that day. We finish the day and get back to the hotel. The client is staying a few hours early partially due to the weather. So dinner is an hour away, so I start taking apart and cleaning my gun. I've done it 1,000 times. Me and the other guard are just chatting and he sees me cleaning my gun and how dirty it is due to the dust storm, so he decides to clean it too. For those unfamiliar with handguns, before taking it apart, you take out the magazine, cock it a few times and check the chamber in case of a stray bullet and then pulling the trigger. He took out the magazine, cocked it, and then proceeded to put the magazine back in. Then cocks it again. And forgets to check the chamber. He proceeds to pull the trigger. A bullet was shot inside the hotel room. Bullet hit the floor and ricocheted and landed 2 inches away from my leg on my bed. If I was sitting just a few inches to the right, I'd have a bullet hole in my leg. Have you ever heard how loud a gun is inside a small enclosed room? I had trouble hearing for days. TLDR, other security guard forgets to take the magazine out of his gun and pulled the trigger while cleaning gun, missing me by mere inches. This is not my only story about him, but by far the most interesting.
Kevin and the Great Olive Caper by Deleted. I know a Kevin who works at a restaurant that had a bar. Kevin asked me about the little red things that grow in olives. Me, wait, are you talking about the pimento peppers used to stuff green olives? They don't grow in there. K, they don't? Me, no. Peppers don't grow in small rectangles inside olives. K, wow. I didn't know that. Not their first Kevin moment, but one of my favorites from a list of many.
Evil Kevin didn't know that animals can feel pain. By Biraccola. Sorry for my English. My friend is a vet. She once told me that one guy brought his cat, who had all his legs broken. The incident, probably abuse, happened 2 weeks before. When she asked why he waited for so long before bringing him to her, he said, well, it's not like he is suffering. It's an animal, he doesn't feel pain. He thought that the desperate cries of the kitty were just for instinct. Edit, I asked her about this story, and she told me that she remembers that he never came back to have the cat again. She put the poor thing in a rescue house.
Kevina thinks she's being kawaii by ConfuzzledCheeseCurd. Be warned, it's a long post. Sorry for any grammatical and spelling error. Kevina and I first met each other in our senior year of high school. We never had the chance to interact much, but from the few times we have talked, she seemed like a sweet, bubbly, kawaii girl. We later ended up attending the same university where we got closer. Around the time I started dating my boyfriend, she got together with his roomie. Well, call her boyfriend Tom, he comes into the story later. Kevina and I would both sleep over at their apartment often, and that's when I really saw her true self. I started to realize how unnecessarily loud and obnoxious she can be. She would announce her arrival anytime she enters a room, as well as knock on our closed bedroom doors for no other particular reason than to let us know she was home. It wasn't any old soft knocking, it was straight up hard pay attention to me knocks. She would then proceed to walk away after she knocks. Kevina also turned out to be completely clueless, ditzy, and lacks common sense, but tries to portray it as kawaii. For example, Kevina would often unnecessarily take the long route through a building to get to the same place we were headed when we were, no joke, a couple feet from the exit. Yup, she would turn around and walk the other way around and meet us at the same door. Now whenever this happened, it was usually with a group, meaning we walked together, and that's when she decides she must take a different route. It's quite frustrating, especially when we're walking together at night on campus and she just runs off ahead into the dark laughing and thinking she's being cute. It seemed she had a tough relationship with her mother, which I won't go into details, but she would complain to us about how she was forced to stay home to babysit her younger siblings and cook for them. She then asked me one day how to make rice, as in how to wash the rice and use a rice steamer. I was confused because, as every Asian know, it's the most basic of basics when it comes to cooking. I didn't think too much about it until I realized the only thing she ever made were scrambled eggs and instant noodles. She has also admitted to not knowing how to cook. What did she cook for her siblings then? Eggs and noodles? Otherwise, every time we went grocery shopping together, she would spend her money on microwavable food and sweets. She can't cook, never buys food to eat that will last her for long, and the best part is she always asks us, anytime my boyfriend and I cooked, if we made any extra for her. Sometimes we would share, but then it got to a point where we had just started to say no every time because we were not going to always feed her when she only buys food that won't last her or learn how to cook. It wasn't like we never offered to help her, she just refuses to learn. On top of that, she loves to not wash her dishes, and unfortunately so did Tom. Kevina also likes to be right. She was working on her math homework one night and she was struggling, so Tom decided to help her out. Kevina was taught one way to solve the problems by her professor, but she couldn't seem to get the answer, to which Tom showed her another way that could maybe help her understand. She didn't like that one bit, for she stormed out of the apartment to the nearby park over a math problem because her way was wrong. Kevina likes being right in every situation and would get angry over the littlest thing with Tom. Another example. Tom, "Hey friend," his way of greeting everyone. Kevina, "What, so I'm only a friend, huh? I see how it is." Proceeds to be endlessly hurt. Tom then ended up sleeping on the couch that night. Now the area where the guys live is sorta sketchy and we always try our best to be cautious. However, Kevina thinks she's invincible because she stormed out yet again, for reasons I can't remember, at night to the nearby park. A stranger came up to her and asked her why she was upset. I can't remember her reply, but the stranger then said something along the lines of, "Oh well, you're lucky 'cause I was gonna rob you." She simply shrugged it off as if it was nothing and returned. These are all the things I could think of right now. We don't talk anymore, but she was a nice and caring girl. There's nothing wrong with being loud or not knowing how to cook, or buying cheap microwavable food, but for me personally, she took it to the extreme, and with school already stressing me out, I just couldn't handle it. I do hope the best for her.
Kevina the Housemate Part 2 by @. This is the tale of the second Kevina I had the misfortune of sharing a house with. Once more for background, this was a few years ago when I was a poor uni student. After the lunacy of Kevina the first, I moved to a new shared house. There I encountered Kevina the second. The house we shared was 4 stories, including basement, which had been converted into a kitchen, and had been subdivided into multiple bedrooms, each with their own door locks. Kevina and I shared the top floor, a converted attic. She had a small box room with a single bed while I had the large room with a double bed. This will become relevant in due time. Kevina herself was Indian and married. Her husband lived on the other side of the city with his first wife and family. So, like Grandpa flashing back to the war, let's dive into some PTSD. Kevina left the front door open whenever she went out. This seems to be a theme. Unlike the previous house I lived in, this door opened straight into the street. I twice found random people in our house, trying to force their way into someone's bedroom. Kevina did not see the correlation between leaving a house unsecured and theft. Kevina cranked the heating to full and on constant whenever she was in. In summer. As a full-blooded Neanderthal, I almost died of heat stroke. Kevina refused to pay any of the $400 gas bill for that month, as she didn't believe that companies could charge for things like utilities and that they were somehow free. When she tried it for the second month, I turned the heating off and took a hammer to the thermostat. Kevina usually ate microwave meals. The one and only time she tried to use the oven to cook a nice meal for her husband who was visiting, she hadn't been able to figure it out. Kevina left the gas on, went out to eat at a restaurant instead. When I got home from work, the entire house was filled with gas. We spent the entire night with the power off and the windows and doors open to clear it out without causing an explosion. Kevina didn't know why we were all so pissed off. After the oven incident, Kevina bought an electric camping stove and cooked all her meals in her room. On her bed. She evidently did not know how to turn it off, as we twice had to break into her room while she was out to put out fires. The house ended up infested with rats. We had bait boxes, rat traps and sonic deterrents in every room. The source was eventually tracked back to Kevina's room, where she had been stockpiling food to cook on her hot plate. She got bitchy about us killing her pets. Kevina decided to get a boyfriend and move him in. This would have been fine, except he was 6 feet tall, built like a brick shithouse and totally psychotic. A female housemate found her door smashed open and Kevina's boyfriend rifling through her underwear drawer. Kevina did not see the problem with this. Kevina demanded to swap rooms as she didn't like sharing a single bed with her boyfriend. I told her to fuck off. Kevina refused to pay council tax. Her argument was that husband paid all the stuff at his house. She could not grasp that bills are applied to the individual household. Kevina invited her husband over for the night. She demanded that they use my bed and that I sleep on the sofa downstairs. I told her to fuck off. Again. Kevina's husband met her boyfriend. She did not understand why they ended up having a fistfight in the street. It ended with police, a divorce and Kevina getting dumped by her boyfriend. After the struggles of getting any money out of Kevina, she stopped paying rent and bills altogether. It turns out that her husband was paying for everything. Kevina couldn't pay for herself as she was unemployed. Kevina refused to get a job and assumed that the rest of us would just pay her way. Kevina was evicted very shortly after.
Kevina the Financial Advisor by LolaandSkitterBug. Oh, the stories I could tell you about this girl. Like the time she got in an argument with a client that was so heated I had to direct message the branch manager to referee. Or the time she asked a client who had just said he had terminal cancer how long his investment timeline was. Or the time when we were told that our phone systems were going to be updated, we'd no longer have to dial 9 before the number to dial out. To be fair, it wasn't explained well. The Karen explaining the new phone said they are taking all the 9s out of the phone system. Kevina immediately said, what if someone has a 9 in their phone number? To which someone deadpanned, you just won't be able to call them. That was Kevina's cue to go on a giant rant about that not being fair. I remember someone once said if brains were gasoline she wouldn't have enough to power an ant's go-kart 2 laps around a Cheerio, and I feel that has to be the most accurate description of her I can give. But the time that will always stand out in my memory is when she was signed up for a business course through the bank. The course used these ridiculously expensive textbooks, which the bank paid for and sent to her via internal mail. She got them just before home time. She decided to unwrap them for a quick look before leaving. Now, where do you suppose she left them for safekeeping? Well, not on her desk. Not on or in her credenza, or the 2 filing cabinets in her office. No, bless her, she left the ridiculously expensive textbooks balanced on top of her garbage can. And she went home for the night. So yeah, anyways, we had this after-hours janitor that would come in and do janitorial things. The next morning Kevina comes in and her textbooks are missing. She lost her Schmidt Q giant fit, complete with madly trying to search all of the other offices. It turns out when you leave stuff in or on a garbage the janitor will throw it out. Who knew? The good news is she transferred to a branch back east. The bad news is she is either still running amok in someone's finances or she's procreating. Or both. It could be both. TL, Dr. Kevina mistook a garbage can as extra storage space.
Kevin thinks he's the only true occultist in the country by adriator. A lot of you guys have asked me about him believing to be the only true occultist in the country, by providing a completely rational argument, which I did use in a prior conversation with him, that a lot of other religions claim to be the only true one. Well, I've decided to postpone the story I'd planned on posting today and just post this one, if only to try and understand his deep delusions a bit more. For others who are reading my stories for the first time, here are the links to the other 2. I'll probably make an index page at some time, and am totally planning on making a long series of, not necessarily, my interactions with Kevin. For those of you who expressed an interest in me writing a book about Kevin, I've noted your suggestions and definitely will at some point publish those stories, not as a series of dialogues, but a coherent story with a beginning and a timeline of these conversations. Please do note that those stories are 100% true. I have nothing to gain by lying here. It also makes me happy that you're enjoying my conversations with Kevin, and as much migraine-inducing as they were while I tried to communicate with him, they are twice as much enjoyable of a read now. Kevin talks to a god who, apparently, does not exist. Kevin forgets he's the one who called me. Without further ado, let's get to the conversation. Kevin, it's so infuriating. Me, what so? Kevin, no one else understands me. Me, Kevin, we do understand you. Your sister, your parents, Us, my sister me, are just trying to help you be a better person, both socially and academically. We were talking about school-related issues and his failing grades. Kevin, see? You don't understand me. I'm not talking about damn school. Me, Then what are you talking about? Kevin, there's no one. Literally no one in the country who isn't a damn fraud. Me, finally realizing what he's on about. If there's no one legit Kevin, then how on earth do you know so much about Satanism? Kevin, it's not Satanism, it's occultism. And of course, I've read all about it on the internet. Me, you've read about it on the internet? Perhaps on the shady blogspot blog? Kevin, just you laugh. It's all true, I'm the only true occultist in the country, and I'm going to find someone like me on the internet. And he did, and successfully got himself scammed out of $100 by a Montenegro fraud, but that's a story for another time. Me, don't you think in a country this large and populous, there would at least be someone else who knows the same stuff you do? Kevin, no, I told you I'm the only one. There's definitely no one in the country like me. Me, and how would you know that with certainty? Kevin, I meditated upon it, okay? At that point, I just lost the will to further argue with him. Enough migraines for today.
My ex-BFF's Kevin antics almost sent her to jail by Sunflower 65667. This girl was my friend from 4th grade to about halfway through college. She wasn't intellectually stupid per se, but was 100% a Kevin in that she would argue with you if you disagreed with her blatantly wrong viewpoints. For example, one time she came over for dinner at my house and we were serving cooked mussels. She couldn't get it through her head that they were not mussels of another animal, but a creature on their own. Another time, we were in an art museum looking at medieval art and she turned to me and asked, "Are the people in these paintings so ugly because they're not as far along in evolution as us?" No, bro. Evolution is a bit larger scale than that. We actually got into a giant fight about this one, lol. But I digress. The incident that drove me to write this post is when we were both in college. She FaceTimed me to tell me she was in trouble. She had tweeted a threat against the POTUS because she hated him so much, saying that she would kill him if she got the chance. I'm not the biggest fan of the guy, but I can't imagine what was going through her head when she made the decision to tweet that shit. Next thing she knew, someone reported her and the FBI showed up at her school. Even after she had to lawyer up, and was thoroughly interrogated by federal agents, she explained to me that she wanted to use this platform to speak out on sexual assault. That still makes me laugh. Girl, the situation you're in is not a platform. You are just dumb. Edit. I actually just remembered another thing she did and am kicking myself for not including it. Currently am dating an Indian man that I plan to marry. One of the biggest crushes of my life was Chinese, and my mom said something along the lines of, "I always thought you'd marry an Asian man. Just mom thing zig." When I told her this, she said, "Well, India is pretty close to Asia."
Taxation and Tipping Kevins by Sunshine8129. This girl I work with is generally super sweet and tries really hard to be helpful. In this instance, she was explaining to another coworker why she gets hooked up at the Italian restaurant. She explained that on a $10 meal, leaving $3 to $4 isn't even enough to cover the tax, so she gives them a $10 tip. Problems with this. Tax is included in the total price of the order. They don't give you a subtotal and hope you'll tip enough to cover tax. Where we live, tax is 9.5%, or close to there, so if you need to figure out tax, round it to 10% and move the decimal one place and you're good to go. I'm not surprised she gets hooked up, and I'm glad she's making their day by trying so hard to make sure they don't have to use their tips to cover the tax.
Kevin will never be a nurse. By Nefriti. I have been telling my friends for months about this particular Kevin, and after stumbling across this subreddit I believe that these stories belong here. TLDR at the end. I am a student nurse in the United States. Here, nursing is a university degree. I point this out because to this day I am baffled that Kevin was ever admitted to the program. In order to even be considered for admission, A student has to pass anatomy, then physiology, and then take the entrance D's exam. Kevin's stupidity begins with bragging to our fellow classmates about how she cheated her way through both classes that she took over the summer in order to be qualified to take the entrance exam. At one point during the first semester, rumors were circulating around the program that Kevin had been cheating on pharmacology quizzes. This is because again, Kevin herself had been bragging about how she never studied and would copy off of her friend. She then named her friend specifically when laughing to the group of students that she was bragging to. Kevin asked the dumbest questions I have ever heard. At first, I thought that she was just trying to get attention and laughs from other students. It never worked, and it always made people cringe. Our instructors often seemed genuinely surprised about the kinds of questions she would ask. One day in particular, we were going over medication calculations. While this is a very basic and simple fundamental skill, it is the kind of situation that can and does get people killed if there is a mistake. The formula is desired/have x volume. Very simple stuff. The class that we were in was 3 hours long and Kevin was holding everyone up because she genuinely just could not fathom what was going on. She started loudly arguing with the instructor, which got other students confused. This was very frustrating for a lot of us because most students record the lectures. After every time the instructor would write out an example on the board, she would lean over her desk and point while nearly shouting, "Okay, now you just wait 1 second," or something like that. By the end of it, our instructor dismissed the rest of us and told Kevin to stay behind to learn. These are just the little Kevin-ish things that I can remember, since this was a year ago. Her biggest screw-up, which is why I believe she belongs here, happened in pharmacology class. Our instructor informed us that never, under any circumstances, were we to ever give an injection into a baby's gluteal muscles. The difference between a baby's anatomy and that of even a small child is too vast, and an injection could puncture a major blood vessel and cause a lot of harm to that baby, or possibly kill him or her. She then gave us a very solemn example of a doctor doing just that with an antibiotic solution that ended up in the baby losing his entire leg. So about a week passes and we are in the middle of a very complicated lecture when Kevin interrupts the lecturer to say, "Hey Dr. Not Kevin, do you remember how that one time you told us to always give a baby a shot in their butts and not in their legs?" And we never got to hear the finished question, because our instructor spun on her heel, lurched over to Kevin's table, planted her hands on the surface and glares down at her. She told Kevin, "That is absolutely not what I said. Please, for the love of God, if you only learn one thing from this class, it is to never do that." We were all shocked. Obviously Kevin didn't make it even to the second semester. She didn't even show up to take the pharmacology final. The last I heard of Kevin, she was still lying to her boyfriend and family about being in nursing school. She lived an hour away from campus and would commute every single day. Nobody knows what she was actually doing with her free time, but I can't imagine that lie lasted long. TLDR, Kevin cheated her way into nursing school, cheated her way through it, and had such a fundamental lack of understanding that she could have made a mistake that would have injured, crippled, or killed a baby.
The juvenile delinquent Kevin was my stepson's friend by Akita_boy. I just discovered this subreddit and I thought I'd tell you about a bunch of things my stepson's friend did and said. He mixed sour key rings in with his weed, then made a blunt and smoked it because he thought it would make the weed taste like candy. He did that in the middle of science class. He thought blue cheese came from blue cows. He thought chocolate milk came from brown cows and strawberry milk came from pink cows. He thought the same thing for any other flavor of milk. He thought it would be a good idea to reach inside the vending machine to get free cookies. They had to dismantle part of the vending machine to get him out. He thought glass and plastic were the same. Why? I don't know. He made a bunch of shanks out of a Monster Energy drink cans and tried to sell them in the middle of the hallway. He smoked pine needles in the middle of science class because it'll taste like pine. It didn't. He had to go to the hospital because he drank 50 Monster Energy drink in 2 hours. I don't know how he did it, but he did. He tried to argue with his math teacher about how 1 times 1 is 2, not 1. He body slammed into the vending machine and shattered the glass, because his bag of chips got stuck. He then took all the snacks out of the vending machine and ran off. He thought he'd get away, but there was a camera, right next to the vending machine. He still denied he ever did that. He thought that when black and white movies were made, everything was actually in black and white and that we invented color. He brought a Roman gladius to school for the play he was in. It was not a replica, it was real. While he was high off Xanax, he tried to chase down a goose so he could eat it. He wasn't even joking. And this all happened the singular year he was at that school. He got expelled before the year even ended. Edit, about the 50 Monster energy drink thing. My stepson told me it was around 50, I'm sure he was exaggerating, but I wasn't sure, so I just wrote what he said. And what I meant by the gladius being real is it was an actual short sword, not a plastic one.
Geographically limited Kevina by Miztykal. I used to work for a big hotel that has several hotels around the globe. Even though it was a call center, they were very picky when hiring someone. Kevina was highly recommended and had an international tourism bachelor's degree, as most of the people working there. When the hotel's anniversary came and they made games and activities through the week so you could get points and win some prizes, such as a coupon for breakfast at the hotel, a day off or a couple hours off. I was sitting next to Kevina taking my calls when a supervisor comes by and tells us it's our turn to play. In this game you had to take 3 little pieces of paper from a box that had country names on them and point at the correct country in a map. I don't remember exactly which countries I got, but I remember perfectly that Kevina got Canada, Australia, and Italy. Even if you don't know much of geography, these 3 countries are relatively easy to pinpoint in a map. Well, she apparently thinks Canada is somewhere in the African continent, Australia apparently is where Canada is supposed to be, and Italy is in the Caribbean. When asked how in hell is she so confused, even though she studied geography as part of her bachelor's degree, she said it was a long time ago and she just forgot, plus, who cares where countries are located, right? It's not like it's an important part of your job description.
College Kevin by bazjack. I used to do homework in the balcony of my college's theater. One day I heard the technical director loudly and sternly state, "Kevin, you cannot lift the board while you are standing on it."
Kevin didn't know that pyramids are real. By Biraccola. Sorry for my English. An ex-schoolmate of mine thought that pyramids were built for tourists and taunted us and the art teacher when we tried to explain why he was wrong. His justification was, why would someone want such a ridiculous grave?
Kevin tries to start a revolution at work by NerdyGuyRanting. A bit learned, so I put a TL, doctor at the bottom. This is about something that went down at work about a month ago. I work in tech support. Specifically, I sit at a department called back office, which is more of a second-line support, meaning we handle more advanced tickets. But most of this story happened at the service desk, which is the first-line support. It all started one morning when we got an email from the CEO which said that there had been a whistleblower report leveled at the bosses of the service desk, SD, and back office, BO, departments. The CEO informed us that they are taking these matters seriously and are currently investigating them. The whistleblower had also presented themselves as a speaker for lots of people's combined complaints. According to the report, the BO boss was threatening employees, running the department like a dictator and creating a culture of fear in the department. The report further claimed that the employees of BO were all scared of her and that no one dared to speak against her for fear of retribution. This came as news to us at BO, who honestly had no idea what they were talking about. Our boss is, first of all, like 5'3" and a bit on the skinny side. Second, she is nice to a fault. Some employees are kind of bossing her around. I don't think she is capable of threatening someone. As for the ESD boss, I have honestly never even met her. I started working here just as the pandemic broke out and people started working from home. I can't speak for the validity of her accusations. But since the accusations were leveled at the ESD boss, and the accusations of our boss was specifically mentioned when she was a temporary boss of the ESD department, we were pretty sure the whistleblower was someone at SD. Fast forward a week or so and we got another email. This one was from an employee at SD, let's call him Kevin. The email was just a link to a Facebook group. It was sent to the entire office at 2 a.m. I ignored it at first, believing it to be some social group for all the employees. Then I spoke to a coworker who urged me to take a look. And holy crap, was it worth it. Kevin had created a Facebook group where he wrote about the awful working conditions we suffered. He never explicitly states to be the whistleblower, but uses a lot of the same wording as the report. For example, presenting himself as a leader of a larger group. English is not our first language, but he wrote it all in English for some reason. And his English was awful. He wrote, "We're 6 people right now leading the pack, and I am the spokesman for all those people." Quoted verbatim. Maybe he believed that this was going to become so huge it would reach international news or something. At the time, the group had 2 members. Himself and another ST employee who probably joined by mistake since he later left. Kevin also wrote that he had contacted journalists and that he was going to start a fundraising project for a lawyer. The crown jewel of the group was a recording of a digital meeting he had with the BO boss while she was temporary boss of ST. Apparently Kevin had a long history of misconduct. To rectify this, they had established a plan for him to improve and had regular meetings to make sure he stuck to the plan. This was one of the meetings he had recorded. In the recording, Kevin repeatedly complained why they were after him for every little thing he did wrong. To which the boss calmly explained because he did so many wrong things. Especially since a lot of them were repeat offenses that he had already been written up for once. Furthermore, Kevin stated that the boss wasn't allowed to bring up some of the offenses, because he had already cleared those up with the EST boss, and she has said it was fine. BO boss explained that, yes, it was fine as long as he didn't repeat it. Which he had then done. Kevin also gave off some kind of sexist vibes and generally had the attitude that he didn't respect her authority. But the best part came at the end, when the following exchange went down. "Kevin, I just want us to understand each other. Because if things don't improve soon, I will get sick of this." Boss, sorry, what do you mean with "I will get sick of this"? Kevin, I'm just saying that I will get sick of this. And I am holding you to that. Boss, what are you saying? Kevin, I'm done here. End call. I don't know about you, but that sounds like a threat to me. It started off as a vague statement, but when he refused to explain it, it became a threat. I don't know why he would post something like this. It very clearly made him look bad. Extra so with all the information about his repeated misconduct. The boss looked like a patient angel next to him. I tried to find a way to save the recording. I was certain he would at some point realize what a mistake it was to post something like that, and I felt it could strengthen the boss's defense if she had easy access to that recording. Sadly, Facebook wouldn't let me save it. So sorry / if you are reading this, I can sell it to you. As it turns out though, Kevin's crusade against our bosses was just getting started. He posted a screenshot of an email conversation between him and a higher-ranking boss where he stated that he didn't want to have his meetings with BO boss alone because he felt threatened by her. The higher-ranking boss said that BO boss was there as a representative of the company, but that he was free to include a union rep if he wanted one. She even offered to make sure to postpone the meeting to make sure he could arrange it. According to Kevin, this was just confuse and legal mumble-jumble. Again, quoted verbatim. The screenshot also included the boss's full name and company email address uncensored. And this was a public Facebook group. Kevin then posted a link to a blog that talked about how to spot if someone was possessed by Jezebel. As in the biblical Jezebel. And how possessed people would present as manipulative and threatening. So Kevin was basically implying our boss was possessed by a demon. If I was a CEO, I would have considered this guy a security risk at this point and have security escort him out of the building. But he stayed. Next up was another recorded meeting with BO boss. This time it was revealed that he had tried to cheat with his time reporting. One day he had been 30 minutes late. After clocking in, he had opened up the program and manually changed his check-in time to make it look like he was on time. He denied this and said he was only 30 minutes late, as if that's much better. The boss pointed out that the logs clearly show that he edited it and that he could check the logs himself if he didn't believe her. He refused to do so. The company also allows us to take up to an hour of every week to go exercise. Kevin had claimed this hour on a day where he only worked 2 hours. The boss said that it's not against the rules, but it's frowned upon, as they prefer you take it when you work longer days. Kevin blew up about this and asked why they were prosecuting him for something that's allowed. The boss again calmly explained that he is not being prosecuted for it. They are simply asking him not to do it again, especially not mixed with all other misconduct. Lastly, they talked about how Kevin had forgotten his laptop charger at home one day and had to go home during the lunch break to get it. They bosses had asked him to check out if he was going to take longer than the 1-hour break. Kevin had promised he would be back on time. His phone activity showed that he had been over an hour late and tried to get away with it by not telling anyone. When asked about this, Kevin tried to excuse himself that since he had spent his lunch break traveling back and forth from his home, he had to take extra time to eat lunch. He went as far as to ask her if she wanted him to starve. She simply responded, "No, we wanted you to check out when you traveled home. We don't want you to try to claim a salary for going home to pick up something you forgot." After that, Kevin mostly just posted some random self-aggrandizing posts where he talked about how rough we had it and how brave he was for speaking out. He really didn't seem to understand his posts did nothing but make him look worse. I don't know if a single person agreed with him that we had poor working conditions. Kevin asked others to email him their stories so he could post them, anonymously, in the group. No story was ever posted. Yet Kevin still talked about this as if he was leading some glorious revolution against some tyrants. When the CEO sent out an email saying that the whistleblower investigation was concluded and that the conclusion was that there was no grounds for the accusations, Kevin was not happy. He made a lengthy post about how the bosses were all liars who protected each other from fault. Then concluded by saying that it's not over. Journalists were most certainly digging into their misconduct and would soon blow this case wide open. After that, I went on vacation for a month and mostly forgot about it. According to my coworker, he posted one more meeting. In this meeting it's revealed that he was caught manipulating the call logs, reporting calls as being longer than they really were, or even making fake calls to excuse not working. Employees can do this, but they keep logs of all alterations. His name was all over the thing. I don't know the exact details, because I never got to listen to this myself. My next interaction with this came last Monday when I returned to work. I was greeted by an inbox full of emails to sort through and found a really odd one. It simply said, "Unfortunately, I have to reschedule our meeting. I hope you understand." It was sent during my first week of vacation. I was confused as to what meeting that was. Then I recognized the name, Kevin McKevin, and it all came back to me. The email wasn't even addressed to me. It was sent to the CEO, and Kevin CC'd the entire office. Who sends an email like that to the CEO? He didn't even give a reason for why he needed to reschedule. I looked for the Facebook group to see if there were any new developments, but the group was gone. I spoke to my coworker about it, and he informed me about the last recording and told me that the group had gone down last week. That meeting that Kevin tried to reschedule was the meeting where the company was going to fire him. Apparently their incredible patience with this buffoon had finally come to an end. So, I am sad to report that the leader of the Popul has fallen. TL, Dr. Kevin blows the whistle on a boss and claims she threatened him. Shortly after, he created a public Facebook group about it and started posting recordings of himself clearly threatening the boss over Skype. Further recorded meetings, posted by him, shows his clear disregard for rules, misunderstanding of standard company procedure and poor attitude. Eventually gets fired.
Sweet Kevina thought baggy jeans were for catching babies by thatpersonisthere. I worked with Kevina when I was 16 back in 2011. We were both apprentices in hairdressing and worked as assistants in a salon. Kevina was strong-willed, independent and tough, but a very sweet girl who was empathetic and generally good-natured. She was 18 at the time, and to be honest, I really liked her, but my God, some of the things she would say was almost unbelievable. One day, I was in the back folding towels when Kevina came in to help. It was just us in that day with one hairdresser and the salon was dead. She started folding the towels with me when she started to look awkward. She said, up. I have a question and I know you won't say to other assistants, so can I ask you?" I said sure and asked what was up. What she asked blew my mind. Here is the conversation. Kevina, do boys wear baggy jeans to catch the baby? Me, confused, I'm sorry, what? Kevina, do boys wear baggy jeans to catch the baby? You know, when they have them the jeans catch them, is that right? Me, Kevina, if this is some kind of a piss take then please don't, it's not funny. Kevina, visibly embarrassed and a bit awkward, I'm serious. Someone told me that. Me, Okay Kevina, let me ask you this. How would a guy carry a baby? Kevina, they have them like girls but instead of the front it comes out of their butts. Like the baby grows and comes out of there. The genes catch them. See what I mean? Me, Kevina, I'm sorry but seriously this isn't funny. I know you guys like to laugh at me but this is too far. Kevina, I'm being serious. Why would I ask you and not the others? I trust you and wanted to know, you don't have to be rude. I looked at Kevina and although I thought she was just making stuff up, the look on her face was dead serious and she looked like she was on the verge of tears. I realized she was being completely serious. So I explained to the poor girl how babies were made and finished with and so on and so forth. Kevina said she had no idea what that meant either so I said it's like etc. etc. She still didn't know what it meant so I had to explain that too. Afterwards I still thought in the back of my head that she couldn't have been serious. But no one mentioned it or had any idea of that conversation. I always knew Kevina wasn't the sharpest tool in the shed but I didn't think it was that bad. Edit. From what Kevina had told me she left school at 13-14 and went straight to working in a salon. Because she wasn't 16, she worked as a Saturday girl until she reached the age that she could work as an apprentice. Sex education starts where I am at 13-14. So I do kind of believe her and met some of her family who corroborated the fact she did leave school young. My apologies, I meant sexual relationships at 12-13 not 13-14. A nice update, a year later Kevina had a little boy. She is a great mother, from what I have seen, haven't seen her in years, and doing well.